Hey everyone, my name's Angela. It's mid-morning here, but you wouldn't know it from our current surroundings. We've rounded 2 corners, maybe 3, and carefully made our way down to a small number of stairways, carved from the stone beneath and lined with decades-old guardrails. And already we have lost all the natural light. We have our handheld electric torches, and to the aid of the little glowing lamps stationed at semi-regular intervals all around. But if they were to go out, we would be plunged into total, unforgiving pitch black. And that would be a real shame, to say nothing of the fear factor. Because despite the anxious nature of our mission, our surroundings really are beautiful. The caves through which we walk are vast and open beyond description, and great pale stalactites hang like the spires of some ancient, impossible city from the ceiling. To crane one's neck to look up at them treats you to an exciting and exhilarating sense of vertigo. The lamps I mentioned earlier glow in a number of soft colors, low greens, pale blues, and deep purples, and they alight the world around in magical and mysterious ways. The rock formations in the corner of your eye look like sparkling giants, curious creatures resting in the shadows, or as towering, fantastical buildings, home to any number of tiny, secretive, cave-dwelling inhabitants. I don't know, I guess I let my imagination get carried away with me sometimes. And we have an important duty here in this cave. There were about 30 of us all together to start with, but 10 of our group had already veered off on their pursuit. The pursuit of the missing girl. Disappeared 2 nights ago, the prevailing theory is that she came down here alone and got herself lost. Probably looking for the mob in Courage, the greedy thing, snorts the woman in front in a haughty voice to her neighbor. I give her a break, I mutter quietly to the girl next to me. She's only 13. The Mabin Courage, for which the caves are named, are a pseudo-mythical set of precious stones, glowing quartz and gems that the caves are supposed to house, worth in theory an absolute fortune, even though it's not known if they've ever been found, or who even named the caves after them in the first place. As an ex-13-year-old girl myself, I can't help but feel like the more likely reason for the girl's disappearance was for a bit of bloody peace and quiet, for some introspective thought. Maybe she wanted a mystical place all to herself in which to vent. I get it. The missing girl's name is Maisie. She's been on the news and everything. That's where I saw the call for volunteers to help in this very mission. I'm no caving expert, but I've been here a couple of times before with my folks. It's a good day out. The atmosphere today, however, is very different. Another group of 10 are sent off down an adjacent set of stairs into the caves. Us remaining 10 continue our descent. The stairs round a corner of rock and our surroundings open up further, lined with great, far walls in the distance, glittering in the gloom on all sides. Wow, it's gorgeous, I murmur. The woman in front turns around to me with a glare. Try to appreciate the severity of the situation, okay? Have a little tact. I flush with embarrassment, muttering out an apology and hating myself for doing so. But then, I don't know this woman. To be fair, she could well be one of the girl's relatives. Maybe that's why she felt confident in criticizing her earlier. I don't know. I tend to make excuses for people. I don't know if that's a strength or a flaw, but whatever. The girl beside me squeezes my hand though, which is nice of her. She's about my age, maybe 18 or 19. I think her name was Darcy. She has dark hair styled pretty nicely, especially considering that we were going down into a cavern. Most of it is hidden under a hard hat anyway. I've wondered what mine would look like dark. It's pretty light typically. I'm getting distracted. This is serious. Our remaining group of 10 splits in half, with 5 being led over the little knee-high rope fence and down a passage to our immediate left. A man calls back to us, to the grumpy woman specifically. You alright to lead this one, Margaret? It's no problem if not. We can keep as a group of 10 if needs be. The woman chuckles and adjusts her glasses. I'm fine, Mark, I can assure you. We'll cover more ground this way. We'll see you back at the rendezvous. This lady's going to be our group leader. I wrinkle my nose and exchange a look with Darcy. Great. The other group disappears until it's just the 5 of us. Margaret leads us a little deeper into the cavern still illuminated, but in an area that I've never been before. I've never been this low before, actually. Down we go, down, down, down. My heart is beating fast, but I don't really know why. I guess because I don't know what we're going to find down here. What if we do find the girl? What if she's dead? I push the thoughts aside. There's plenty of water down here. She could definitely still be okay. Margaret stops and swivels on her heels, and the rest of us shuffle to an awkward stop. Right, she says, clapping her hands. Do we all have our radios? Hard hats securely fastened. There's a general murmur of assurance. I want you all to pay very close attention to me as we descend further now. Is that understood? Yes? My word is as good as golden from here on out. Caves are dangerous places and not to be messed with. The other 2 members of our group are a couple of guys in their mid-20s. One of them chirps up. With respect, lady, are you actually qualified for this? She glares him down. I know these caverns like the back of my hand, she says coldly. You would do well to show some respect. The guy mutters something under his breath but does not properly respond. We're in the hunt of a young girl, says Margaret, so come on, sharpen up. She turns away, clicking on her torch, and she leads us off path, past colossal clusters of rock and through a naturally arched passage in the stone. The little lamps are further apart through here and not so bright. One of them flickers, buzzing as we pass it by. It throws jumping shadows up and across our surroundings. The light recedes and the shade grows. Darker and darker. Creepy, Darcy murmurs, shivering. Oh, nonsense, Margaret replies from ahead. Stick close and there's nothing to be afraid of. Look out into every crevice, keep those eyes peeled. Maisie could well be down here somewhere. She's a bit of an idiot if she got lost by these lamps, mutters the guy. They lead right back to the entrance. Well, that's why we're going down deeper. Margaret snaps back. What's your name, young man? Gaza. Gaza, Margaret repeats with disgust. Yeah, that's right, and this is Jamie. His mate nods to her and to us, smiling. I smile back. Margaret mutters in response, unimpressed, leading us ever onward and downward. Excuse me, Margaret, I ask as we resume walking. She looks back over her shoulder. The lamps are really far apart now. I think we're reaching the edge of their reach. Yes, Angela, was it? Yeah, I reply, that's right. Did you know her, Maisie, the missing girl? No, I didn't. What gave you that idea? I shrug. No reason. Margaret makes a little noise, and beside me, Darcy points her torchlight up into her face so that I can see her rolling her eyes. The little lamps don't give off any heat, but the cave seems nonetheless to become much colder as we leave them behind. I wonder if Maisie had anything warm on her when she came down. If she came down, she might not even be down here, but it's worth a search regardless. It's creepy enough in here with the torches and in a safety of a group. I can't imagine how Maisie might feel. Would she have brought a torch of her own, or is she lost, alone in the dark? It's so quiet, so bloody quiet. Our breathing sounds suddenly so much louder. Our footsteps are loud against the rock. My eyes dart constantly from left to right as flickering torchlight-thrown shadows catch my attention again and again. Jamie stops at the edge of a relatively steep drop and calls down into the gloom. "Maisie," he says aloud with his hands around his mouth. "You down there, girl?" I presume that Margaret is going to scold him, but she does not. What happens instead, to my dismay, is Gaza creeping up behind his mate and shoving him hard in the back. "Hey!" Darcy calls out, and Margaret turns at once to witness Jamie expel a shocked gasp of breath and stumble forwards over the edge. The humor drains from Gaza's face as he throws out a hand to try and correct his prank, to try and grab his friend by the shirt, but he isn't quite quick enough. We all watch in sudden panic as Jamie slips and stumbles, falling over the edge and down into the dark. "Jamie!" Gaza shouts, his hands on his head. He scrambles to the edge on his hands and knees, and with a grunt of pain and frustration, we heard Jamie grumble in the shadows down below. Torches are pointed in his direction, revealing him rolling around in pain about 3, maybe 3.5 meters down. A long way to fall when you're not expecting it, but not lethal by any means. He groans as he squirms on the rock. "Stupid boy," Margaret barks at Gaza. "I'm sorry, mate," Gaza shouts down. "You're a moron," Jamie calls back up. "What is wrong with you?" Gaza grimaces but doesn't reply. "Maybe we should radio the others," I suggest, glancing cautiously from Gaza to Margaret. "We could call for some rope or something." "No," Margaret says at once, and the other two look at her as well. She goes on. "I mean, there's no need to bother the others. I know a way back up. I've been here before." She calls down to him. "Try to stay roughly parallel to us, Jamie. We'll get you back up in no time. Follow our lights and voices." Jamie grumbles. "Yeah, all right, if you say so. I'm good to walk." And up he clambers with a grunt, stretching his legs and arms, and then keeping pace as Margaret leads us out at an angle, a diversion from our original route. "What did you do that for?" Darcy says to Gaza. "Idiot." To his credit, Gaza actually looks embarrassed. "I know, yeah, it was an accident." He looks to me as well, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "It was just a joke. Didn't think that he would actually fall in." Jamie's torch was damaged in the fall, and through gaps in the rock and cracks in the wall, we could see his beam flicker in and out of life. I make a noise of surprise as my foot comes down in a cold puddle. There's water around us now, and while it's difficult to see given our current surroundings, I can smell it, dank and wet. Jamie's torch flickers again, cutting out this time for a good 5 seconds or more. We hear him swear and smack it against his hand before the device returns to full beam. "Screw this," he shouts up from a place out of sight. "If I find the gems, I'm not sharing them with you, Gaza." Gaza chuckles weakly. I doubt that Jamie even heard. "Are they real, do you think?" And Darcy asks the group as we walk single file through a narrow passage of rock. "The gems?" "I've heard they glitter in shades of blue and red, great clusters of them. They'll be worth a bloody fortune," says Gaza. "It is highly unlikely that there are any actual gems," proclaims Margaret from the front of the procession, interrupting. "And if there ever were, they'll be long gone by now. Try not to be so selfish." "Selfish?" Gaza snorts. "Are you trying to tell us that you wouldn't take even one if you saw one? You would leave them here in the cave where they ain't any good to anyone." She shoots an icy look back at him. "If there were any quartz down here, I can assure you that I would leave them well alone. They're artifacts. I would log the location and inform the relevant experts so that they could be studied." "BS. You would take one." Margaret stops and turns to him. "I would not," she retorts shrilly. "And you would do well to watch your mouth. Insolent young man." There's an awkward pause. "Everything all right up there?" calls Jamie from behind the walls of rock. We carry on along our way. About 5 minutes later, Jamie returns into clear view. Us four stand atop a ledge a mere 2 meters tall, and we can haul Jamie up it with relative ease. If he can get to us, that is. As between us lies a drop of incalculable depth. I peer over the edge. It goes down into the depths of the cavern below, filled with mighty upwards pointing stalagmites. Jamie looks down into it and then back up at us, throwing out his hands. "What is this? I can't make it across there. I thought you said that I would be able to make it." I try to shine the beam of my torch down into the depths of the drop, but curiously my light only seems to go so far. I don't understand it. It's as if the light is caught on a sheet of invisible film stretched across the gap. I struggle to make sense of it. Margaret says, rubbing her chin. "It is admittedly a little wider than I remember it, but you should be all right." "What are you talking about?" Jamie calls back. "You don't want me to jump it, do you? Nobody can jump that far, that's insane." "Oh, have a little patience, goodness," Margaret shouts back, and then crouches to pick up a loose piece of rock from the ground. She leans over the edge and then tosses the little stone down into the drop. It falls past the height of our little 2-meter outcrop and then it disappears. My mind struggles with what it's seeing. It is as if the rock has struck the invisible sheet of film, rippling and vanishing from sight. And then I realize there is no drop. The hole in the cavern is nothing more than a body of water. A body of water so still, so impossibly still that it reflected perfectly the view above our heads. There were no stalagmites pointing up towards us. They were simply reflections of the vast stalactites pointing down. I can't help a little noise of amazement at this illusion. "Whoa. You're just gonna have to swim across, Jamie," Margaret calls, and Jamie responds with a string of swears. "You're such an idiot, Gaza." Gaza calls another apology over the pool. "How deep is it, Margaret?" Jamie calls. "I don't know, not deep, but you'll have to swim." "For Pete's sake," he grumbles, easing himself down into the cool body of water. After a pause, he shouts, "Not deep. I can't feel the bottom. Oh, just swim, Jamie." He mutters to himself as he begins to drag his body, equipment and all, through the water. It won't be helping him, but he's a strong-looking lad, and he has no real difficulties in his progress. Illusion now broken, the water is turned black, and it shivers with Jamie's movements. A breeze ripples the edge of the natural pool, little waves churning softly in Jamie's direction. Except there is no breeze. That's why the illusion worked in the first place. The air in here is dead still. Now you might have experienced this next feeling. It's a rush of cold and deeply unpleasant panic. It's a fear that starts low and shivers its way up your body. It's the sort of feeling you're subject to when you realize you might have made a catastrophic mistake or messed up very badly in an important way. It's kind of what I feel like now, but it's more primal now, heightened by our alien surroundings. I try to speak out, but find that I can't. Down there in the darkness, something slithers through the water. I'm sure of it. Beneath the black surface of the little lake, there is movement. I finally force out the words, but I think Darcy might have seen it too. "Jamie," I shout, and he looks up at me in shock. "There's something in the water. Move, you have to move." And a faint light from an unknown source is made clear to us, reflected in the rippling on the surface. but its source is down in the watery deep. I'm not sure if Jamie sees the dark shape moving about in the water behind him. What he does see, however, is the panic written across the faces of his team up on the ledge, illuminated eerily in the flickering of their torches. He starts to swear and curse, taking in mouthfuls of cave water as he pushes himself through the rocky pool at double speed, arms flailing. There is something in there though, in the water, the shadow of something large, obscured by the rippling waves thrown out by Jamie's movements. It follows after him and seems to cast up strange and sparkling lights from its own body, down in the deep. And Gaza is crouched down at the edge of the rocky drop, hastily knocking a little cluster of stones over the side as he reaches out an arm. "Quick, Jamie!" Jamie scrambles up onto the bank below, water pouring from the sleeves of his clothes as he half staggers, half crawls towards the steep ledge, reaching up to meet Gaza's grip. The two boys grab each other's wrists, and Darcy and I grab hold of Gaza, and the three of us haul Jamie up onto the ledge. I look over his shoulder as we do so, but the shape in the water has vanished. The pool reveals nothing but shimmering ripples in the darkness. With a final grunt, we haul the soaking boy up onto the outcrop, and he lays there panting and dripping as he runs a hand over his face. "Thanks for your help, lady." And Gaza grunts at Margaret after he's caught his breath, but she isn't even looking at him. She's still staring wide-eyed down to the pool below. "Impossible," she murmurs to herself. There's no way. Nothing can live down here, nothing like that." "What was it?" Jamie asks, through breaths, looking between us. Darcy shakes her head. She's gone pale. "I don't know, I didn't really see it, I just saw movement, a weird shape." "Angela," she turns to me. I grimace anxiously. "I don't know," I reply quietly, "but it was pretty big. Something about it was emitting a little light too, but I don't know how." "Alright, screw this," mutters Jamie, reaching down for his radio. He draws it up to his mouth and presses the button on the side, but the radio's LED fails to switch on. He tries again and then shakes it, and water spills from the holes in the receiver. He swears again. "Gaza, radio the others. I'm done with this." Yeah, about that. I can't, I'm afraid," he says, glancing at Margaret. "I don't have one. Turns out I did actually forget to grab one after all." He shrugs and Margaret seems to return to awareness. She glares at him in disbelief. "You what? Stupid boy. How could you be so careless, so irresponsible?" Darcy sighs. "I'll do it," she says. "But can we get moving already? We really need to get out of here. If we saw what we think we saw, then we're probably in real danger right now." She lifts the radio up to her mouth and calls for help, briefly but succinctly explaining the situation. The device crackles, but there is no response. She tries for a second time, but is again met with only silence. "Is it on the right channel?" I suggest, but Margaret suddenly scoffs. "We don't have time for this," she says. "This is some kind of twisted prank, I presume. But anyone willing to pull such a prank in a place like this very likely is dangerous. Follow me. Let's head right to the rendezvous." "That didn't look like much of a prank to me, Margaret," Darcy replies levelly, but the woman brushes her off. "Quickly now, chop chop." "A prank? Surely not." The rational part of my brain wants to believe it. It wants to believe it desperately, but it just can't. Jamie shivers as we fall bitterly back in step. "Are you okay?" I ask him, and he nods, smiling at me. "Yeah, I'm alright. Sorry about all the swearing and stuff. Not usually like that." "Oh, no, it's all good, honestly." I give an awkward little laugh. No one's ever apologized to me for swearing too much before. It's actually kind of sweet. "You can be honest with me, by the way." he says quietly, shooting a look back over his shoulder into the darkness of the cavern behind. Is there anything that you're not telling me? There really was something in the water, wasn't there? I nod. Yeah, there was something in there. It looked, I don't know, kind of reptilian, I guess. I didn't get a good look, but the way that it was moving, slithering. I trail off and Jamie asks me no more questions. We do start to walk a little bit faster, however. After about 10 minutes, the beam of my torch catches on an enormous stalactite, far out in the distance of the cavern, surrounded by an almost perfect ring of smaller spikes on the shadowy ceiling. Hey, I say softly, did we pass those stalactites on the way down? We didn't, Darcy says with certainty. She stops. Margaret, where are you taking us exactly? This isn't the way we came down. The boys stop too, but Margaret doesn't. She doesn't even turn around. I know the way. We're heading right to the rendezvous. Margaret, the rendezvous is back up closer to the entrance. We seem to be going back down, says Darcy. I know where I'm going, the woman snaps. Have you any idea how many times I've been down into these caves? I'm the last person to get anybody lost. Have a little respect. Hello, there's a monster down there, lady. And Gaza shouts suddenly. Is this the way back or not? My name, Margaret replies with a shriek, spinning on the spot and jabbing a finger into Gaza's face, is Margaret. Her final word echoed around the vast and gloomy walls of the cavern. Margaret, we hear, ever fading as it bounces off the rock, steadily disappearing into the dark. Silence follows for a few long moments, and then it evaporates, broken by the sound of an approaching hiss. Like a gas leak, and at first, that is what I believe it to be, until it suddenly drops in tone, becoming louder and more throaty. With a shaking hand, Darcy slowly lifts her torch, back the way we came, and I turn to follow the light of the beam. It catches on the edge of something enormous between the rocks, slithering through the cracks. Like a living shadow, it snakes away from the light, and the hiss grows louder. It's after us. Margaret! Gaza shouts, grabbing the woman by her shoulders, with such force that their hard hats knock together. The way out. Which is the way out? She stares at him in silence. The edge of hysteria creeps into the group. Margaret's name is shouted several more times, drowning out the sound of that encroaching hiss until, this way, it's this way, she says, gathering her wits and hastening away between two narrow walls of rock. We follow, jostling and pushing into line, though the crevice is only big enough for us to move single file, and as fate would have it, I found myself at the back of the procession. We're moving at pace, but it's just not fast enough, and we're still going too slowly. Is this what happened to the missing girl? I can't help but think. To Maisie, lost to the hunger of this monstrosity in the dark. My heart thrums loud in my chest. I spin around and cast the light of my torch back behind me. Behind the edge of the crack in the wall, I see the rough shape of our pursuer, ever just out of sight, creeping and crawling from rock to rock, as one with the dancing shadows in its approach. Faster! I murmur with fear, and then louder. Please, just hurry as much as you can. I push up against Gaza, in front of me. God, I'm going as quick as I can, he says to me. I've never been much for confrontation, but needs must. Move, I shout, forcing him faster as the torchlight catches again on the thing in the shadows. It's getting closer, I can tell. Would it be able to fit down this passageway? I don't want to wait to find out. After a terrifyingly long 2 minutes, we push out into a wider cave, stumbling over each other, and there is a splash and then another, an exclamation of alarm, and then my foot comes down into a body of dark water just below knee height. I'm not expecting this drop and I panic, dropping my torch into the water as I slip. I steady myself and then reach down to grab it, shaking, but already the device's light has started to flicker. We're in a roughly roundish room of slippery stone. Sharp spires of ever-eroding rock hang menacingly up above overhead, and the walls are filled with a number of holes at varying sizes. Some are mere groves and look only as deep as an arm could reach, but others are tunnels. Black tunnels that lead away into the pitch darkness of the unknown. Jamie looks around bewildered. Gaza has his head in his hands. Darcy tries her radio again, and I peer back into the crack through which we clambered. I raise my torch, and as it flickers, it catches on a great and monstrous shape, squeezing its way towards us. A picture of rippling scales and shiny shell segments that cascade over and into each other like the mechanisms of some twisted and alien machine. The torch flickers again, and then it cuts out. The view is lost. "Guys!" I scream. "Where do we go?" "You've lied to us, Margaret," says Darcy, slowly turning to face the woman that led us here, her teeth clenched tight. "You don't know where to go, do you? Do you?" I don't understand," Margaret stutters. "I could have sworn on the maps this area. I swear this area is supposed to lead us eventually back and up into the main passage." "Maps?" Jamie cries out, which Gaza repeats. "You've only ever seen this place in maps. I thought you said that you had actually been here." The hissing grows louder. Scratching and wet scrabbling becomes louder at the edge of our hearing. I am hit by a sudden wave of terrible claustrophobia. We're trapped in here, trapped in this rocky room. I start to feel like the walls are closing in and my breathing becomes shallower. And the water around my legs tricks my brain into thinking that I'm struggling for air. I hate it. I hate this. How did this happen? If I knew then how much worse my claustrophobia was about to become, I probably would have been taken in the grip of a panic attack right then and there. When the moment came, however, it all happened far too quickly for me to give the situation much mental analysis. Margaret was babbling some nonsense, genuinely flummoxed, or caught in her own arrogant lie. We never find out. "It's coming," says Gaza. "I can see it, I can see it." "What about these tunnels?" asks Jamie, the terror evident in his voice. "Where do they lead, Margaret? Do you know?" "She doesn't know a thing," says Darcy with disdain, "and I don't think we have much of a choice." She raises her torch and casts the light over the tunnels closest to the water. They are not large. There's not even enough space to crouch. If we're going through, then we're going to have to crawl. "Gaza, Jamie, you two take that one. Angela, you're going to go through this one with me, okay?" I can only nod. "Margaret, go wherever you want." Margaret pushes past us at once and jumps into a tunnel a little further to the left, muttering to herself in fear. "Do they all go to the same place?" I ask her as she passes. "The tunnels." "They must do," she shrieks. "The map." "Ah, screw this," Jamie says. "She hasn't got a clue. Girls, good luck. Here's hoping that we'll see you on the other side." And he pushes hastily through the water and scrambles into the lowermost tunnel with a splash from his feet, disappearing quickly into the dark. Gaza follows. Darcy turns to me as the scratching and the hissing grows louder. "You go first, it's okay, I'll be right behind you." "Darcy! Hey, you can do it, go on, quick, quick." I do so for her sake. I scramble into the tunnel on the right. It's dark, terrifyingly dark. My torch flickers in my hand and lets out a worrying little buzz every time I inadvertently smack it against the rock as part of my hasty crawling. The sound of my breathing increases tenfold. It echoes around and around in my head. There is so little space. I can feel all the dank, slimy walls of the tunnel press up against me as I crawl. And ahead, there is only darkness. I whimper with distress as I drag myself through the tightness of the tunnel. With every one of my movements, I can feel the cold and clammy stone all around, sapping the warmth from my body. The sides of the passage squeeze in a little tighter. and every one of my senses is screaming at me in panic. I can't breathe in here. There's not enough air. There is enough air, Angela. You can do it. Keep going, keep going. I think about the terror in the darkness, the abomination that slithered up out of the water. Could it follow us down here? No, surely not. It's too big. But then I didn't think it would be able to follow us through the crack in the rock that Margaret had led us through either. So I don't know. I just don't know. I let out a shout of fright as something knocks into one of my feet, before I remember that Darcy is right behind me in the tunnel. Stay calm. My torch has gone dark again. Darcy has switched hers on, but the tunnel is so tight that next to none of the light makes it past my face to illuminate the way ahead. I smack my device with the back of my hand a couple of times and it sputters back to life. The tunnel goes on. Keep breathing, Angela. Do you think Margaret's right? I call back to Darcy. Do you think that all the tunnels link back up? What? She calls back. It's too muffled and she can't hear me. My torch cuts out again and the way ahead is lost once more to shadow as I crawl. I grunt with frustration. I said, do you think that Margaret is? My voice catches in my throat as, mid-crawl, my forearm lands on nothing but air, and I take in a sharp breath as I lurch suddenly forwards. My torch slips from my hand and bounces away, down into the dark. Every time that it smacks against the rock, the light flickers on and then off, granting me fleeting glimpses of the sudden steepness of the tunnel, sloping down into shadow. Darcy, I don't know if I can do this, I shout out loud. Angela, comes the response. I don't want you to panic, but I can hear that thing moving about in the water back in the cave. I suppress the fear. I can't let it out here, not now, not in this place. And so down I go. I try to keep a steady crawl, but soon I lose any hope of grip on the slippery stone. Not even by wedging my limbs against these sides can I do much to slow my descent, and I find myself tumbling down through the darkness, eyes wide and adrenaline racing. I can just about see the faintest of glows from my torch, from wherever it is that it has landed, and it allows me to see the faintest highlights of rock as it rushes right by. Something sharp scrapes against my jeans and cuts my leg. I cry out. I try not to think about what might happen if I end up getting stuck in here, unable to move, trapped in place, upside down, alone in the dark. What if it leads into a body of water? Stuck upside down in a tunnel as tight as this, half submerged in icy water, it might as well be one of the worst possible ways to die. It's a mercy that I do not fall and slip for particularly long, so I'm not given much time to dwell on this grisly fate. The light of my torch becomes clear and the tunnel ends. It opens up into another little cave, and as the walls disappear behind me, my hand smacks into the torch, knocking it from its precarious perch, and down it tumbles, with me into the water below. I shriek as I hit its surface with a great splash, the bubbles rising past my ears as my surroundings are lost to a world of dark water. But there is, at the least, space. I can kick and move my limbs about freely, and I do so, pushing my way quickly back to the surface, my torch in hand. I gasp in the air of the cave and swim over to the side, clambering out and onto a rocky little ledge. I shake my hands and wring the moisture from the ends of my sleeves, holding back sobs of relief as I start to process the terror of my little journey. My torch barely works now. It flickers and sputters weakly, and then it cuts out altogether. I cannot bring it back to life this time. The device is dead. And yet I can still see a little of my surroundings. There is still some source of light in the cave. Shivering, I climb to my feet and I look around. A faint pale glow emanates from behind a nearby corner, and I cautiously walk around the rock to get a better look. What I see takes my breath away. "No way," I murmur, the lights of the sight before me sparkling and reflecting bright in my eyes. Amongst a tumbled pile of stone and rock directly ahead is a compact collection of clustered quartz and crystals, shining in shades of red and blue. They're like nothing that I've ever seen. This is them, I realize, the gems of the cavern's namesake. They're real. I take an awed step closer. Gaza was right, surely. There's no way that even one of those things isn't worth a small fortune. You could take one, Angela. You could take one right now. Prise it from the rock and stuff it into your pocket. I reach out a hand and I hear a splash and a cry of alarm. "Darcy." I swivel at once and return to the cave to the edge of the pool. "Darcy," I call to her. "Hey, over here, it's okay." The girl splashes about in the water and then, without warning, throws me her torch before it can become too waterlogged. To my amazement, I actually catch it, fumbling the device a little as I do so. Darcy swims over to me and I help haul her up onto the rocky bank. "This is insane," she sputters, spitting out water onto the ground. "Well, wait until you see what I've just found." I tell her, and after helping her to her feet, I show her around the corner, and together we are caught in the spell of what's before us. "Wow," is all that she can say at first. "Yeah," I reply, not taking my eyes from the gems. "I know what you're thinking, Angela," she says to me eventually, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't thinking it too. But I reckon that we should leave them be, just as they are. I turn to her. "Are you serious?" I ask, but I can hear the seriousness in her voice, to tell the truth. "Yeah," she says. "They're pretty, but honestly, they give me the creeps. Don't you feel it? I really don't think that we should take any. It feels wrong." I look back to the clusters of quartz. Now that she's mentioned it, I'm starting to feel it a little bit too. The unsettling vibe that the crystals give off. And besides, what would I do with one if I took it? How would I sell it? Would it be classed as stealing? I'm not sure. But Darcy has turned and began to make her way a little bit deeper into the cavern. She looks back at me. "Angela, you ready?" I pause. The crystals that glitter with temptation. But I leave them behind. They are beautiful, but we know roughly where they are now. We can tell somebody about it when we get out. If we get out. I shudder and tear my eyes away from the soft glow of the red and blue, and I fall in step beside Darcy. We follow the light of the torch away and into the rocky corridor. We are limited in our choice of passage. The route we take now was the only one that was even visible to us, but we follow it dutifully around through the dark, every shadow or unusual outcrop of rock sending chills right through us as we anticipate the return of the terrible beast from the water. I wonder if it was swimming about beneath us when we fell from the tunnel. The thought is a disturbing one, and I push it aside with all the rest. Darcy stops and puts out a hand, and I freeze, tensed. I can hear something. We listen carefully and hear it again. It's a voice. It sounds like one of the boys. We look at each other and hasten down a little faster, and the voice has become clearer. It's Jamie and Gaza, all right, calling out our names. We start shouting back, and our route eventually splits up into multiple passages. We follow the sound of their calls down the passages that we think they're coming from, and after a few more minutes we find them, bone dry and surprised to see that we're soaked. "Hey," Jamie calls to us, stepping closer and pulling me into a hug. "Oh," he says, stepping back, "you're all wet. What the heck happened to you guys?" "Our tunnel didn't come out in the best location," says Darcy as she nods to Gaza. "What about you guys? Have you seen Margaret?" The guys share a look. "No," says Jamie eventually. "We haven't found her and we tried, believe me. Look, let's show you where we came out." They lead us back into the cavern. I glance at Darcy, not failing to appreciate that she hasn't mentioned what we found. I'm not sure why, but my gut instinct tells me to do likewise, and I keep quiet. The cavern the boys came out in is much wider than ours was, and the walls are lined with lots of tunnels instead of just one. Jamie points. "That's where we came out. There's another room next to this one with a few more holes, but they're the only ones that we could find. Margaret must have come out of one of them, we're sure of it. We've wandered about a bit, but we haven't seen any sign of her yet." "Yeah, screw her, I say," says Gaza with a sniff. "Old bat, she nearly got us killed." He's not wrong, but his words stir a general sense of unease amongst the group. "We should at least try and look for her," says Darcy to a murmur of reluctant agreement. Gaza shrugs. "Fine, but try to remember that we're not alone down here. Have either of you two tried your radios recently?" We haven't, so we do so now as the boys start calling for Margaret through the tunnels. As always, however, the radios give us only silence, broken by the occasional crackling, watery static. Our hunt for Margaret lasts for all of about 5 minutes. We try, honestly, we really do try, but she's nowhere to be seen. "I don't get it. Why didn't she come out of any of the tunnels?" asked Jamie. "Maybe she did," says Darcy quietly. "Maybe she was the first one out and made a run for it." "Would she?" I ask, but in my heart of hearts, I feel like I know the answer is yes. Our search is cut short by the sound of an echoing and all too familiar hiss. To my horror, however, it doesn't sound like it's coming from any of the tunnels. We all turn back to look through the maze-like passages of stone, listening to the sound of the creature's terrible approach, waiting for its shadow to spill into our field of vision at any moment. "Yeah, screw this, I'm out of here," says Gaza, and he takes off down an opposite corridor into the dark. "Come on," he shouts, and we join him, with a total of 2 working torches between us. Through the darkness we race, our footsteps loud against the cold stone, Darcy and I still dripping even now as we run, and the monster follows. We push out into an enormous cavern, not quite the largest so far, but not far off. Great pillars of shimmering rock rise up all around, and for the first real time in our expedition, we find ourselves with the option to climb higher instead of being forced lower. At the cavern's edge is a rough outcrop of stone that ascends up and up, like a rough imitation of a staircase. One so crude as to be barely recognizable as such, but it makes no matter. It leads up, and if we're careful, we can climb it. No guardrails though this time. Gaza is the first one to try it. I wince, half expecting the rock to break away beneath his feet, but up he climbs, gripping the wall for balance as the outcrop isn't particularly wide. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3. "Guys," he shouts, "get a move on already." "Go," says Jamie, and he gestures Darcy and I up after Gaza. We warily start to climb. The ground begins to drop away behind us as we shuffle higher and higher. We rise up with the towers of rock, but the creature is coming. I can't say how, but I can feel it. We all can. It's more than just that growing hissing. It's an almost physical weight, growing heavier and heavier as it draws nearer. Just as we're approaching the top of the climb, near a wider and more substantial platform of stone, I hear it. Not the monster, but something else. I hear a voice. The voice of a girl. "Please," she murmurs weakly, and I stop at once. Darcy bumps into me. "Hey," she says, but I shush her and we listen. The voice comes again, a little bit louder. "Hey, please." I turn to look out over the expanse of rock and stone, and there on the opposite side of the cavern, on a ledge not dissimilar to our own, is the girl. Maisie, the missing wanderer, alive down here in the depths of the caves. "Oh my God," Darcy murmurs, and then she calls out, Hey, are you Maisie?" The girl does not reply but nods and begins to sob. I feel the great weight of the gaze of the monster on the back of my head. It's in the cavern. It can see us. Gaza scrambles up onto the rock ledge above us. He turns around and makes a hurry up gesture with his hand. "Guys, we gotta move. I'm not kidding about here. I can see the monster in the darkness. It's right behind us." "What about the girl?" I ask him, and I watch as his eyes dart over to her and then back. He says nothing, but I can see his intentions in his face, only half illuminated in the torchlight as it is. He means to leave her behind. Perhaps he senses this. "We can come back for her," he says. "We know where she is now, but we gotta go." I've never been a hugely confident or decisive person, but I feel something now. A burst of energy that I can't ignore, and I refuse his will. I toss my torch to Darcy and I push past him. I need no deliberation here. "Angela," he shouts, but I ignore him. I sprint across the surface of this wider rocky ledge to the opposite side of the cavern. Macy's own outcrop hangs just a little bit lower. It provides an excellent view of the cavern below, or at least it would if there were a little more light. And a slow, steady leak in the rock above fills a little pool to the girl's side. Perhaps this is why she chose such a location to rest. I scramble down onto my hands and knees and reach out a hand. "Come on," I shout. "Grab my hand, let's get you out of here." And then a little quieter. "It's okay, we can help you." For a moment, the girl does not move. She only stares at me as if she's too afraid to trust that somebody has actually come for her. I'm about to hop down onto the ledge myself and help her to her feet, when the rising hiss through the darkness bids her stir. She reaches up a shaking hand and I grab her wrist. It's so thin. A shadow moves in the darkness below us. Great and oily, the wild and wavering beams of the remaining flashlights allow us fleeting glimpses of slick, sparkling shell and scale. I grimace and haul Maisie up onto the platform. Jamie races across as I do so and helps Maisie to her feet. She squints and slams tight shut her eyes as the beam of Darcy's flashlight passes across her face. Her legs shake. "Come on, I'll carry you," Jamie says, lifting her up onto his back, and away we run across the ledge, meeting up with Darcy halfway across the platform, and with Gaza still at the far end. "Move it!" And to my horror, I catch a glimpse of the enormous creature slithering its way up the cavern wall, climbing and clambering towards us. With Darcy and Gaza at the front with the torches, we race through this new level of the cavern, round columns and spiraling stone, along natural pathways, and between great, still, and black underground lakes. At least I think they're lakes. They're so motionless down here in the depths, so undisturbed, that I cannot tell if they are indeed the illusions that I now expect them to be, or are actually the great holes to the rocky world below that they're pretending to be. Either way, it matters little to us in our current state. Gaza and Darcy are trying to lead us vaguely upwards, but they don't know where to go. I mean, none of us do. So we just run, onward through the solemn stone of this secret landscape. And Gaza eventually drops to his knees and starts to crawl through a tiny arch in the rock. Darcy, after a rapid inspection of the area, follows. Jamie sets Maisie down and she gets the picture crawling after them. Jamie and I do likewise, and it's not until we're through to the other side, in a smallish room of smooth and curved stone, that we feel safe enough to just stop for a minute and rest. Darcy turns out her light and nudges Gaza to do the same. He does so with a little click, and we're plunged into total darkness. The only sound our ragged breathing as we fill our lungs. That terrible hissing mercifully has disappeared. For now. As we get our breaths back, an uncomfortable tension hangs in the air. "You meant to leave Maisie behind." I want to say to Gaza, I mean it's true. He wanted to leave her where she was. I know that Darcy at least feels the same way. I can feel her stir beside me, but neither of us say anything. There's a time and a place for such a discussion, and right now is neither. I hear Maisie sniff in the darkness. "Does anybody have anything to eat?" She asks softly, but we're forced to reply apologetically that we do not. My own stomach rumbles, reminded for the first time today how hungry I am. Maisie, I realize, must feel 10 times worse. "So what happened to you, Maisie?" Darcy asks eventually, as our eyes begin to adjust to the dark a little bit. Only a little, mind you. I can only see the very, very rough edges of my comrades' silhouettes, and even then only when I'm not looking directly at them. "How did you get lost down here?" "It was stupid," she says at once. "I shouldn't have come down, I really shouldn't. I often sneak in, I don't live so far away. But this time I don't know. I went a little bit deeper, I was curious. My phone jumped from 11% to 0 and I panicked. I started trying to retrace my steps in the darkness, and then I thought that I saw some light at the edge of the cavern. I thought it was the lamps, the ones around the trails, but the light never got any brighter. I followed it deeper and deeper, and then it just went out. I was more lost than when I had started, so I found a place to sit and to wait, but nobody ever came." "Until now," whispers Darcy. I hear a shuffling and wonder if perhaps she has moved to squeeze Maisie's hand. "Did you have to crawl through any tunnels?" Gaza asks after a beat. "What? No, that sounds awful," Maisie replies. "Good, so there's definitely another way out then," the boy murmurs, and it's a valid point to be fair. "Did you see anybody go past you, Maisie? A woman, perhaps?" asks Jamie. "No," the girl replies. "You guys are the first people that I've seen, and I don't know actually. I don't know how long I've been down here. The monster is real, isn't it? That's why we were running just now." "Have you seen it before?" I ask her. "In my dreams, at least. I think that they were dreams. It becomes really hard to tell what were dreams and what was real after a while. I saw it watching me, peering over the edges of the rocks. I always saw it so clearly, and then when I was awake it just disappeared. I could never keep a hold of it." She trails off. "And then, it spoke to me sometimes," she says quietly. I feel a chill pass over me. "What did it say?" Darcy whispers. "It asked me what I would do if I ever made it back to the surface. It asked me about my life. It asked if I wanted to die alone, die down here in the dark." She starts whimpering and her voice catches in her throat. We sit there in relative silence for a little bit longer, but there is no sign or suggestion of the creature. And even if there was, there's no way it could make it through that tiny arch, surely not this time. But that is little comfort. Gaza clicks on his torch and we squint and shield our eyes in response. One by one, we all adjust back to the light, and wordlessly we rise to our feet. Maisie is shaky, but she can stand, and indicates her desire to walk beside us. There is only one route available to us now, another corridor of stone, though this one is a little bit wider. We can walk two abreast if we choose so. We follow it, trying the radios again at various intervals. I flick through all the channels just in case, but there's nothing. Nothing but silence and the occasional crackling of static. Do you guys not know the way out?" Maisie asks anxiously, but nobody responds. She doesn't ask again. We walk for 10 to 15 minutes, perhaps a little bit more, into the passage once again widens out. I'm doing my best to keep our bearings, but my thought process is interrupted and my jaw drops low. "Holy," somebody mutters, and I don't blame them. The walls in here are covered, and I mean covered in paintings. They look ancient to me, cave drawings and the like. Aboriginal symbols and shapes. It's simply spectacular, there's no other word for it. What are these paintings doing down here so deep in the cave? Why would anybody come here willingly? Gaza asks. He looks all around and I do likewise. In the center of this cavern, a series of low and smallish rocks have been arranged into a circle, with one slightly larger, taller rock in the exact center. This pillar is surrounded by a ring of still black water. This is insane, Jamie murmurs. Look at all of this. The paintings on the wall are largely in shades of yellow and white, but upon close inspection and amongst the shapes and symbols, some of them have been painted blue and in red. The colors have faded over the years, but the differences are noticeable. I step closer to one of the walls and look up at the great depicted scene. It shows several figures in various poses, surrounding a creature, some prehistoric-looking lizard. The lizard appears to be eyeless and snarls angrily at the people surrounding it. Another scene a little to the right shows another one of these creatures bearing down on a helpless figure as its fellows run the opposite way. Well, I guess there's no gems then. I hear Gaza mutter from somewhere behind me. If there were, then this would be the place to find them. I exchange a glance with Darcy, but we say nothing. I don't really like these paintings upon reflection. They unsettle me very deeply. Guys, says Darcy, and the fear in her voice has us all turn to her as one. We step closer and look up to the wall that she's pointing us towards. The great rock is covered in intricate linework, painted figures with their hands on their heads, some bent over in prayer and some caught in the thralls of some kind of dance, or madness perhaps, it's not clear. In amongst them is an enormous animal, reptilian and colossal. I have to lift my gaze to take in its entirety. The creature has been drawn without eyes and with a mouth of twisted teeth that draws far back into its head, far further than any creature I've ever seen. And as I step back to get a better look, I realize that the edges of the creature have been drawn in such a way as to mix, to merge with the landscape in which it has been drawn. It is difficult, near impossible in fact, to see where the lizard ends and the painted rocks and pillars and the stalactites around it begin. They are one and the same. The colors bend and the lines flow into and out of each other. What is this place? Jamie says quietly, and then a noise causes all of us to jump in alarm. Gaza cries out in panic and swears, and somebody lets out a shriek. Could be Darcy, could be Maisie. My radio begins to crackle. A distorted voice comes screaming through the receiver. I fumble with the device and lift it from my belt, holding it out at arm's length as if it might suddenly strike. My heart pounds as we stare at the thing, listening to the warbled cries of terror from beyond. I would never, comes through the crackling, and my eyes go wide. I stare at the others. It's Margaret. I wouldn't. Don't let them. About me. The radio keeps cutting out. Please. And then her voice is lost to screams. There's another noise there too, something low and wet. The radio crackles and it cuts out. Silence. Movement catches my eye. I turn to look at the little pillar in the center of the circle of stones. My movements feel heavy all of a sudden, as if the strength of the gravity of the cavern is somehow increased. And I look at the little ring of black water. No longer still. I don't fail to notice. It shimmers and ripples subtly, as minuscule little waves are sent around and around and around. And before we know it, the ground has begun to shake. From all around, there comes a low, deep rumble, one that seems to shiver the very rock beneath our feet. Guys, Jamie says, but his sentence goes unfinished. The pillar in the center of the cavern, ringed by stones and by the dark shifting ring of water, has begun to glow. Not from the rock itself, you understand, but from a multitude of tiny minuscule holes all across it. holes that I hadn't even noticed before. Little pinpricks of red and blue light filter out and into the cave, and Gaza takes a step towards it, the light sparkling in his eyes. Except he's not looking at the pillar, he's looking down into the water. It's them, the gems. I follow his gaze, and sure enough, there they are. Another cluster of those ethereal quartz and crystals, glittering just beneath the water's surface. I always thought there would be more, Gaza says, seemingly unconcerned by the tremor that shudders through the walls and ground. I heard that there is a whole field of them, but still. He reaches down. Crouching slightly, he reaches out a hand towards the water. Wait! Jamie shouts at him, and Gaza pauses, turning back to his friend. Don't do it. Why? Gaza asks, and a flicker of confusion passes over Jamie's face. I don't. He struggles for the words. I don't know, it feels wrong. Feels wrong? Get lost, mate, Gaza replies. But Jamie darts forwards and grabs him, shoving him away from the water and the pillar and out into the cavern. What are you doing? Gaza shouts angrily, stumbling but keeping his footing, shoving Jamie right back into as the two threaten a fight. The walls of the cave, to my horror, start to move. The painted shapes and figures start to twitch and writhe as if they're dancing or desperately waving, but it isn't them, I realize. It's the rock upon which they're painted. I watch in terror as an outcrop of stone starts to crack and chip. A large reptilian leg pries itself free. A great snake-like segmented body becomes clear in the darkness, and it starts to steadily climb down the walls. It's in here, I call out to the group in alarm. The creature is in here. And that's when I see the second of the creatures, and the third and the fourth. There was never just one. They're everywhere. They start to appear across the high ceiling. Boulders in the corners of my eyes start to uncoil. I see them slither from the rock pools at the cavern's edge. The hissing returns and rises to a terrible chorus. I look around at the others and I see that Darcy is already encouraging Maisie through a tiny gap in the wall. Close in size to those terrible tunnels, Maisie crawls through army style and disappears from sight. Darcy calls out to us, "Guys!" Jamie positions himself between Gaza and the gems. Gaza swears at the boy and grits his teeth. He casts one long, lingering look at the gems, sparkling and shining in the ring of water, and then tears away his gaze and heads reluctantly for the crack in the wall. Jamie grabs my hand and pulls me over. I crouch down at the entrance to the gap in the wall and I follow the others. "Jamie," I begin, but he hurries me through. "Just go." And so I do. I see them gather behind him, the creatures, shifting shapes in the shadows, and I bitterly look away as I push myself through the tunnel as fast as I can. My leg stings where I cut it earlier, but I ignore the pain, as well as the bruises forming on my elbows and knees, and I follow the others through the dark, scrambling across the stone, my breathing loud in my ears. And once again, to my relief, the tunnel does come to an eventual end. And to my greater relief, there is Jamie, crawling out of the tunnel behind me. "Jamie," I say with a grin. I can't help myself, and I help haul him to his feet. He is deathly pale and silent. He manages a weak smile as his eyes meet mine, but he says nothing. "Quickly, but Christ, watch your footing. Single file, okay?" comes Darcy's voice, and I turn to see what she's talking about. The way ahead is obvious, but it is dangerous. Before us lies a narrow bridge of rock that extends across the length of a great chasm, and to our right, my heart sinks. To our right, half embedded in the stone, is an enormous lizard-like skull. It is beyond massive, whale-like or bigger. The bridge of rock which we must now cross is at the rough level of the skull's lower jaw. These jaws are lined with hundreds upon hundreds of teeth, of varying shapes and sizes, and the skull is eyeless, eye socketless, I should say, where one would expect to see gaps for eyes or just layers of smooth, cave-darkened bone. There's no real time to stare in awe or to contemplate. Darcy pushes on ahead, carefully making her way across the bridge. One wrong step and she'll fall down to the rocky depths below, lost forever. Like Margaret, maybe. I shiver. What happened to that woman? Her desperate words through the radio ring through my head. I put my arms out for balance as I cross the bridge. I'm no longer sure if I can hear hissing at the edge of my hearing or if I'm simply imagining it. The echoey ambience of the caverns plays nasty tricks on your hearing. With a final stumble at the far end, we wait for Jamie and then sprint up and away into the caves. Maisie struggles with the effort and Jamie once again helps her up onto his back. I pant with growing exhaustion. They're never going to stop, are they? They're just going to keep coming. Unless we make it back, Darcy replies. Unless we make it back to the surface. The monsters, I say through breast to Jamie beside me. They didn't. Kill you, I wanted to say, but I couldn't find the words. Jamie knows what I'm trying to say. They came so close I could feel them behind me. I could see them in the corners of my eyes. I could hear them hissing and I thought, well, this is it. But it wasn't. I think on what Maisie told us about her dream. Jamie, did they speak? Did you talk to them? Jamie does not reply. We pass by great, coiling spires of slippery stone. We cross another of those terrifying bridges, though one a little wider this time. We race past an enormous hanging stalactite far out in the distance of the cavern, surrounded by an almost perfect ring of smaller spikes in the shadows of the ceiling. Wait, I shout with excitement, coming to such a sudden stop that Gaza knocks into my back and I'm temporarily winded as Darcy helps me up. This, I swallow in some air. Look, don't you recognize those stalactites out there? Yeah, I think I do. We passed them before. When did we pass them last? Darcy asks. When we were still with Margaret, says Jamie solemnly. This is the way she led us back before getting us lost. We were on the other side, I say, heart pounding with tiredness and with hope. I'm sure of it. It's the same circle of stalactites, but the angle's wrong. We were higher up. The ledge on the opposite side is taller by a few meters than the one that we stand on now. I point. That's where we need to go. And Jamie hoists Maisie up a little bit higher on his back. Well, then what are we waiting for? And Gaza's being quieter than usual, and I look at him with concern. His face, however, is hidden in shadow, obscured behind the corona of light from his torch. He falls in step. We make our way around the edge of the cavern to the identified point, a little bit slower now. The hissing seems largely to have ceased, but I remain very much on edge. The gems are poisoned, Gaza, I say to him quietly so that the others can't hear. You must see that. The paintings on the cave walls of the creatures. They were the only things drawn in red and blue. I'm not an idiot, he mutters back, but there was time I could have grabbed one, pried it free from the stone, just the one. He looks down into his open, empty hand, slowly closing the fingers. Just one. You made the right choice, I try to reassure him. They're not worth it, and besides, they're just lumps of stone. They could have been worth pennies. Sure, Gaza replies, and his tone suggests that the conversation is done. Angela's right, Jamie says after a little while longer, as we stand on the ridge at the cavern's opposite side. This is exactly the place, he points. That's where Margaret led us through the crack in the rock. We were being followed even back then, says Gaza grimly. There could be any number of the monsters still around here. Well, then let's not stick around, Jamie says. I say we retrace our steps back to the ledge, where you guys hauled me up and out of the water. From there, we should be okay. Come on. I look at Darcy. She is stock still, barely even breathing. Darcy, does that sound okay to you? A good plan, do you think? Darcy doesn't answer, she only nods, and then she gestures us onwards. And so that's exactly what we do. We trudge carefully and quietly back through the dark across winding paths of stone until we reach the ledge. I am disturbed to see that the water still hasn't settled since our debacle, and it ripples and shimmers subtly as we look down to it, the illusion of the deep cavern still broken. Right, Jamie says, looking around. Margaret led us back up there. Guys, try to think. Which way was it that Margaret led you down? Gaza and I look around, struggling for the memory, but Darcy sets off at once, round at a slight deviance from the way we just came. And Gaza and I exchange a glance. It seems right, and so we follow, back through the caverns. I walk a little faster to catch up with Darcy at the front. Hey, is everything okay? I murmur. What's going on? Something's up, isn't it? Darcy smiles weakly at me but says nothing. I grimace with frustration. I'm starting to get a little sick of people not talking to me. Darcy, I say a little more urgently. What's up? Are we in danger? Yes, she replies under her breath in a way that chills my blood. What is it? I ask, glancing behind us into the dark. The others aren't far behind. It's been watching us since the stalactites, Darcy mutters almost imperceptibly. Angela, don't look, but it's on the ceiling. It's above us right now. A terrible wave of icy fear passes through me, and I know that she's right. Simply by speaking the words out loud, I know that they're true. My ears pick up a slight scuttling, one that I hadn't noticed before, back when I had only been listening for that terrible hiss, directly overhead. I can see it in my mind's eye, crawling and slithering around on the rocks up above, one with the shadows and the stone in its pursuit. Why, I consider with terror, why wouldn't it just strike? Margaret's screams through the radio return to my memory. Just keep walking, Darcy whispers. Keep moving. And so we do. Back past the puddles, I cringe and panic as I step down loud into a particularly deep one, making a noise that echoes out into the darkness. But nothing happens. Up we clamber, up past familiar pillars of rock, back past the place where Gaza pushed Jamie over the edge. And there up ahead is the greatest thing that I've ever seen. Around a corner of rock comes a faint and purple glow. It's the glow of one of the lamps, I'm sure of it. The lamps they use for the trail. I don't dare to believe it until the corner has been rounded and I can see the lamp with my own two eyes, and the relief amongst the group is palpable. Yes, shouts Gaza. Oh yes. We made it, oh Christ, we made it. Jamie breathes with relief. Maisie has begun to cry, but Darcy and I remain silent. The lamps are obvious now. Glowing in faint green and turquoise and purple, they'll lead us back to the entrance. Darcy's radio begins to crackle and through it comes the voice of a man. The man from the beginning, I remember. The one who asked Margaret if she was all right to lead. Third call, comes his voice, rich with concern. Third call for Task Group 5. Please make yourselves known and return to the rendezvous. We're calling off the search for the day. Repeat, we're calling off the search for the day. Darcy brings the device up to her mouth at once. We have her, she says, fear and excitement and hope all rolled into the inflections of her voice. We've found Maisie. Please get everybody out of the caverns as quickly as you can. Over. The group scurries up behind her back to the safety of the light, and perhaps, against my sense of better judgment, I allow myself one final look. One last, quick look behind me, and my eyes are caught at once in the spell of the gems. For there they are, just a little further back in the caves beyond the immediate reach of the lamp, glittering in shades of ruby and aquamarine in the darkness, a cluster of shiny and shimmering quartz. How did we miss them? They were right there this whole time. How did we pass them by so easily? I think about what I had said to Gaza. They're poisoned, I had said so matter-of-factly. I told him that he made the right choice by leaving them behind. I can feel the red and blue lights sparkle bright, reflecting in my eyes. How arrogant of me to say such things to him. After all, what do I know, really? I could take one. I wouldn't have to tell the others. I could walk right over and pry one free. I consider it. I really do. Perhaps I would have done, who knows? Perhaps I would have done if the lights of the gems hadn't suddenly gone dark. I blink. Where once there were beautiful crystals, there now sits perched on the rock a simple cluster of dark stone, broken, dull gray shards, and this cluster moves. It moves along with the rock upon which it is held, and all the rocks around it too. Just beneath the cluster, the long dark mouth of the reptilian creature becomes clear. It snarls silently with its long black jaws full of terrible teeth. The segmented shell of its snake-like body cracks free from its surroundings, with a little burst of stone, and a lizard-like leg is suddenly visible at its side. I'm frozen in terror. I can't move. To move would make a noise. I am silence itself staring. With a final low, warning hiss, a deep, crocodilian noise from the back of its throat, the shadowy lizard turns away, and the lightless black rocks upon its head go with it. Away it slinks, back down into the depths, back to the shadows of its home, disappearing into the darkness. I back away, one step and then another, and then turn and I run. I run after the others, back up the cavern towards the entrance, through the welcome light of the lamps. And so we told them all our story. Our talk of monsters and skulls and the gems were listened to thoughtfully, but they didn't believe a word. You could see it in their eyes. Maisie was returned to her family. The caves had been sealed off pending further investigation, and a more qualified team of professionals have gone down in search of Margaret. She was never supposed to lead us down so deep, apparently. What was she planning to do? What if Gaza hadn't pushed Jamie off the ledge? I don't know. We'll never know now. Because they're never going to find Margaret. They didn't hear her final message through the radio. They didn't hear her screams. And I find myself these days thinking often of a particular conversation. A conversation that took place between Margaret and Gaza on our initial way down regarding the crystals. It's highly unlikely that there are any actual gems, Margaret had claimed with such surety. If there ever were, they'll be long gone by now. Try not to be so selfish. Selfish? Gaza had snorted. Are you trying to tell us you wouldn't take even one if you saw one? You would leave them here in the cave where they ain't any good to anyone. If there were any quartz down here, I can assure you that I would leave them well alone. They're artifacts. I would log the location and inform the relevant experts so that they could be studied. Yeah, BS. You'd take one. Margaret had shrieked in response with such vibrant, outraged indignation. I would not, she had said. I would not. Damon McCory, Ray, Big Country Allen, Jerry Ramey, Nelson Asada, Die Screaming, Meat Gasher, Dala Magara, Caden Gibler, Justin Fotenauer, M.B. Massacre 91. That one woodsman